What's a harmless habit that actually makes someone insufferable once you notice it? Before we start, don't forget to subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the next videos. I wish you a pleasant viewing experience. Story 1. Never ever agreeing with you, no matter how trivial or inconsequential. You will make a point and they will go, well, actually, it's like they have to be right all the time. And it's exhausting to talk to people like that. Answer. I know somebody who does this, and I've noticed a common technique of theirs is that anytime you're making a point about a particular thing, they'll make a point zoomed out to a general rule. And if you're like, well, yeah, I get that in general, that might be the case. But in this instance, I don't think so. And then they're like, wow, LMAO, you don't believe this in general rule. Let me go ahead and prove it to you, even though I just said I agreed, or vice versa. Like you'll make a point about a general rule not related to any particular context, and they'll be like, yeah, but I know of this exemption to that rule. And if you say, oh yeah, for sure there are exceptions. I was just making the point about the general rule. They're like, oh my gosh, I can literally prove that that's not true. All the time, BC, I know of an exception, and I don't try and change the subject. BC, then you're running, or you just can't accept criticism. Do y'all know what I'm talking about? LMAO. Story 2. Someone once told me I have an annoying habit of interjecting myself into conversations with my own experiences of whatever thing they are discussing, rather than just listening. I've since made a conscious effort not to do that, and now I notice when others do so. So hey, step back, listen, and then if you have something to add, do so when the other person has had their moment. Story 3. Lying about things that don't matter. To either one up someone or just for attention. I have several examples, but just off the top of my head, I used to work with a woman that brought her dog to work. He was delightful, she was not. We're all dog lovers, and I was having a conversation with another coworker about foods that are toxic for dogs. Every food we mentioned, onions, garlic, grapes, coffee, etc., she chimed in to tell us she feeds those to her dog all the time. No the fudge you do not. It was like that with her daily. Answer. My soon-to-be ex-husband does this, and it's so strange to me. Like you said, lying about things that don't matter. What's even the point of making up such benign things? It's so bizarre. He would tell people that he makes pickles every summer, when in fact he made pickles one summer. Then he changes how many pounds of pickles he made every time he tells a story. Sometimes it's 100 pounds, sometimes it's 300 pounds. He's got this braggy way about him, like everything he says needs to be so impressive. Story 4. I've met people that I've almost instantly clicked with, and you form a bond quickly, too quickly. You feel like something is off, but you can't put your finger on it. They may be new to your office or class or whatever, but suddenly seem to know everyone. They're hanging out with people all over the place, crossing groups, friends, enemies, doesn't matter. Everyone just loves them. Why? Because they show an interest in people, and people love to feel seen. Then they start to share little things here and there, and you want to build trust and a deeper connection, so you reflect that and share some things too. Until one day you realize they are casually dropping very private and personal things about other people in your conversation while asking things about you, and it clicks that this person has boundary issues, is insecure, and needs validation from everyone, but doesn't know how to be an actual friend. If they're talking shoot about others to you, they're talking shoot about you to others. I'm getting better at spotting it sooner and setting my own boundaries. There's a reason these type of people always have drama. Answer. I see myself in this and it's uncomfortable. ETA. I think for me, this came from getting very little attention or validation in childhood. Our family was also very socially isolated. My parents didn't have friends, and we lived far away from all family. I think because of this, I got both very good at putting on the charm and drawing people in, while never learning the nuances of social dynamics. Also mix in some ADHD and impulsivity. Anyway, learning. Well, mostly I stay away from people these days. Story 5. When you tell them about someone doing some fudge shoot to you, they automatically agree with defend the other person, even making up wild hypotheticals to justify their behavior. And when called out, claim they're only trying to play devil's advocate. My ex did this whenever a man did anything bad to me. Story 6. Leaving random half-tipsy cups all over the darn place, claiming that they aren't done with it even though every cup they've used was completely left alone for days. Put the darn cups in the sink. Holy shoot. Story 7. It's hard to have conversation with people who are chronically hasty, impatient, jump to conclusions. They love to interrupt you when you are in the middle of answering the question they asked, and the worst part, they don't even realize they're doing it. Story 8. One-upsmanship. Can I just have a story about something and that's it? It sneaks in too. At first, it seems like just continuing the conversation until it presents itself with every response to everything. Story 9. I got on Bumble BFF looking for other female friends since all mine moved out of state, and I noticed that the vast majority of other women on there do not ask questions back, nor will they initiate plans. It's like they're treating finding female friendship the way they'd approach dating with a man, I guess. I instantly unmatch with them now once I realize they're not asking questions back. Like, I'm not your boyfriend. A friendship should be reciprocal. IDK, why they're like this. Story 10. Telling me you'll do something then, either not doing it or doing something completely different. At first I thought it was quirky. He had ADHD. Over time I realized that a relationship can't be maintained if I can't rely on his word. No matter how good your intentions, actions matter more emo. Story 11. Playing devil's advocate too much? It's fine and even healthy to play the devil's advocate sometimes, but when you have to do this in every conversation, it's insufferable. At some point, it's less about including other perspectives, and it's more about being a contrarian because you like to argue. Depending on the topic, it's not necessary and oftentimes not appropriate. I think a lot of people who overplay the devil's advocate card are also just trying to look smarter than the people they're speaking with. And honestly, that's just as insufferable as being a contrarian. Story 12. I have 3. 1. Assuming the worst from people in your life. I'm not the type that can decode subtext easy, and I have a tendency toward pessimism, so incorporating an actual practice of assuming the best or even just neutral from people has been huge. If someone has a problem, they are an adult and can use their words to tell me. It is not my job to predict or anticipate that. 2. Forcing the conversation back to yourself. I definitely don't mean replying to a story with a related story. I think that's literally fine. I mean when people wrench the topic towards something about them because they can't relate to others without centering themselves. 3. Name dropping. I do not care. Story 13. Not being respectful of other people's time. Having others wait around on you. For example, saying to come over at noon so you can go somewhere. You show up at noon and they say, okay, I'm about to hop in the shower real quick. Story 14. Then someone responds to every single thing I say with that's fair and fair, fair. I've met people who only respond with this and no other words, and it happens enough to notice and kind of pull me out of focus. I can't think of a legit reason I'm annoyed though. Story 15. People who are overly positive. I don't mean optimists. I mean people in straight denial of the impending negative outcomes of their actions and just respond with, it'll be fine, or it'll work out in the end. Yeah, this too shall pass, but I'd rather it not involve me having to bail you out first. Story 16. People who constantly modulate their opinions to match yours. I really love that movie. Oh, cool, it wasn't really my thing. Yeah, I guess it wasn't that great. Like, please have your own opinions. It becomes difficult to have interesting conversations with people like this because it's just about impossible to get a legitimate back and forth going. Story 17. PPL who can't make a decision. Where you want to eat? I don't care. When you want to hang out? I don't know, I'm free whenever. What movie you want to watch? Doesn't matter, like OMG, can you pick anything? It's even worse when it's their idea. I'm hungry, let's go eat. Okay, what do you want? I don't care. Story 18. Biting utensils when eating. I once knew a dude who would bite down and then scrape utensils out of his mouth with his teeth when eating. Perfectly nice guy, but I don't speak to him anymore. Just pure torture. Story 19. Being late and thinking it's cute or funny. Hey, lunch will be ready at noon. Doesn't arrive until 1. They have patience at 7, but doesn't get there until 7:15 or later every morning. They know I'm coming. It's pretty fudge rude, disrespectful, and sort of narcissistic. Story 20. I have a very competitive friend. Sure, it's harmless, but the way she's involving her children with these competitiveness will really get to your skin. An example, if she finds out your child gets a better score than her child in class, she'll make up an excuse why her son got that score that day. And if yes, it was just a 2 or 3 point difference. No one's even asking for their excuse whatsoever. She and her son must always be superior than everyone around them. She's a fun friend, yes, but I don't want that toxicity around us any longer. Glad my son's not classmates with her son this school year. Story 21. I once spent the day with someone who ignored service workers. Didn't say thank you to the bus driver. Didn't say thank you or even you too when a cashier would say have a good day. It was embarrassing. Story 22. Vague booking on Facebook. Basically just posting vague dramatic comments on any social media. If you want me to be concerned about you, post a bit more detail. Something like, OMG, I can't believe this just happened is annoying as hell. Usually that person just wants a lot of attention all at once. Story 23. Not taking no for an answer. I'll have friends ask me to go to an event and they'll say no and they'll be like, oh, Martin, it'll be fun. It's gotten really bad where they'll call me after I said no twice. I don't even answer the calls. I get you want me to join you, but if I say no, accept my answer. Story 24. My wife is in general not annoying at all, but she has one annoying habit that I cannot break. When we travel, I drive, which means she needs to navigate. When telling me which way to turn, she will say that way while pointing. Lady, I am not looking at you. I'm looking at the road. I cannot see which way you are pointing, and we just passed our exit. Story 25. What, you woke up at 5:30 a.m. today for work? Well, my son woke me up at 5 a.m. because he wanted to do puzzles. You don't even know how good you have it that you get to sleep until 5:30 a.m. I have it so much worse. Woe is me. Story 26. Yeah, this happened to me recently, I'm so tired today, as I couldn't sleep last night. Don't talk to me about tired. You don't even have kids. You don't know what tired is. I mean, true, but also rude. Darn. I'm sorry I couldn't sleep, and I'm sorry your little ones also don't sleep. Story 27. One of my exes was like this. I had a long day at work and was tired. Well, his day was longer, and he's more tired. We're both sick with a cold. His is more intense than mine. I had something good happen, while he had something better. So yeah, we're no longer together. He very much lacked empathy and compassion. Edit spelling. Story 28. I work with a person like this. Admittedly, they have had a shoot go of it, but everything is always worse than whatever you're experiencing. I heard this and shared it with them, and I think it made them stop and think at least. When you're drowning, it doesn't matter if it's in the ocean or a bathtub. Story 29. I've always thought that those people aren't actually interested in having a conversation. They view it as a contest where they have to score points to win the interaction. They don't give a darn about any sort of give and take or exchange of ideas, all those pesky things that make up actual conversations. No, sir. They're in it to win it. Answer, right? It's a hierarchical thing. I think you'll probably notice a person like this doesn't do this with their boss because they're subordinate to their boss. If they do it with you, they either consciously or subconsciously define their identity, at least in part by considering themselves superior to you and smarter than you. Or it's an insecure thing where they consider you a threat because you are a challenge to their self-image, and they have to compete with you because they don't like the feeling of you being above them. Story 30. My ex would do this with everything, even for topics she knew nothing about. She would pull some bullshit out of her jerk and say it with pure confidence and defend it to her passing until you pulled up something online contradicting her. Then she would say, yeah, that's what I meant said. I actually started recording conversations with her because she would start a screaming argument when I called her out on the blatant gaslighting. Answer. Holy shoot, I had to resort to recording conversations with my ex too. Absolutely everything I said was wrong, and if I ever brought it up again, it never happened, and I was trying to start a fight by suggesting he's lying. Me. The sky is blue. Him. Blue? That's the stupidest thing I've ever heard. The sky is clearly not blue. Me. So what color is it? Him. You're obviously trying to start a fight, and I'm not having this conversation. A later date. Me. So you know how you said the other day the sky isn't blue? Him. No, I didn't. Why would I ever say the sky isn't blue when it clearly is? Not only is it blue, we never had that conversation. I'd then be told I was crazy, making stuff up to cause an argument. This was almost 10 years ago, and I'd never heard the term gaslighting, so I had no idea that was what he was doing to me. I honestly thought I was losing my mind and was starting to question my reality. That's when I started recording. Story 31. I know somebody who does this, and I've noticed a common technique of theirs is that anytime you're making a point about a particular thing, they'll make a point zoomed out to a general rule. And if you're like, well, yeah, I get that in general, that might be the case. But in this instance, I don't think so. And then they're like, wow, LMAO, you don't believe the in general rule? Let me go ahead and prove it to you, even though I just said I agreed. Or vice versa. Like you'll make a point about a general rule not related to any particular context, and they'll be like, yeah, but I know of this exemption to that rule. And if you say, oh yeah, for sure, there are exceptions, I was just making the point about the general rule, they're like, oh my gosh, I can literally prove that. That's not true. All the time, BC, I know of an exception, and don't try and change the subject BC, then you're running or you just can't accept criticism. Do y'all know what I'm talking about? Elementron or Story 32. Yes, my mom does this with every sentence I utter, big or small, it doesn't matter. Anything I say must be immediately contradicted or rejected or trivialized if it's something absolutely indisputable. She won't even let me finish a whole thought. She'll interrupt as soon as she's found something she can conjure up an objection to. Story 33. Remember, what is considered insufferable depends very much on the individual. Of course, there are traits that are universally insufferable, but I've already seen talks too little. Talks all the time, beating around the bush and being assertive in the same thread. It's inevitable that you'll be the villain in someone's story. Just try to be the villain to as few people as possible. Story 34. I flew from San Diego to DFW once. A couple days after, I had a mole carved out of my backside, and the pain meds were not cutting it. I had booked myself a window seat, and the lady next to me kept remarking about the view, how nice it must be, and gosh, she wished she'd been able to get a window seat, clearly angling to get me to offer to swap. I finally turned and said, "Mom, I am exhausted. I am in pain, and I am not giving up my seat. Leave me alone." I felt only about third as bad as I would have been expected to from my childhood. But darn, woman, if you don't get what you want after the first try, state it plain or shut up. Answer. In college, me and some friends in my dorm ordered pizza and chocolate lava cakes. We all split the cost and got an equal amount of pizza. Another girl on the floor, who was constantly passive-aggressive or hinting at things without saying them directly, came out and said, "Wow, that pizza smells so good." She had done this kind of thing before, and even though it annoyed me, I figured I could spare a slice, so I gave her one. But then the chocolate lava cakes came out. I was obsessed with Domino's chocolate lava cakes at the time, and they came in packs of 2. While I'm eating the first one, this girl says, "Wow, that chocolate lava cake looks so good." I said nothing. She continued to comment on it, so finally I offered her a bite, and she took it. At this point, I was so fudge annoyed. Then she said, "Wow, that was so good. I wish I could have a whole one." I don't remember the last time I felt rage like that. I managed not to blow up at her. All I said was no, but she was so shocked that I would dare say no that she literally cried and went back to her room. That day, I told myself that I would never again entertain passive aggression. You want something from me? Ask. Story 35. Or instead of giving direct answers to questions. I'm a grown-up, I can take a no if it's a no. Don't string me along to avoid offense or whatever this is. It just pisses people off more to not know where they stand. Story 36. I dislike this. I've told numerous people if they want me to do something for them, they need to ask. I refuse to take hints anymore, and the result of this is that I rarely get asked to do anything anymore, which is nice. It got to the point where I felt people were doing me a favor, allowing me to work on their broken stuff. Story 37. Similarly, not saying what you mean, aka most neurotypical communication. I'm autistic and I really struggle with the whole implied meaning part of NT communication. I don't have it, I only say what I mean. And it causes so much confusion and people getting mad at me because they're reading an implication or something in what I said that I didn't say. It also happens when asking questions, particularly in university. They'll answer the question they think I mean instead of the literal words that come out of my mouth. For example, I was buying a car a few months ago and asked the dealership guy how big the gas tank was on the car I was test driving. He said it wouldn't be too expensive to fill up, thinking that's what I was getting at. But that's not what I fudge asked, is it? I can calculate how much it will cost to fill up based on variable gas prices if you just tell me how big the tank is. I asked 2 more times and he gave me vague answers about how far I can go or how gas prices vary. I gave up and looked it up later. I was on 100L. That's all he had to say, or say he didn't know and look it up himself. Answer, I'm ADHD, so I can hard relate. I prefer directness versus beating around the bush, or worse, hinting instead of just directly stating. I'm quite sure my mom is ADHD as well, though she'd never even consider that herself. But due to her heavy masking for all these years, she's leaned in hard to the hint versus ask thing. It's incredibly annoying to deal with and causes a lot of communication issues between us. But then, even more annoying is that my dad has learned to expect that type of communication. So when I ask him a question, he is always trying to infer the true meaning of my questions and hardly ever answers my questions at face value because he thinks I'm communicating like my mother does. I live with them, which just makes it way more fun, lol, not. Story 38. Also, the opposite is annoying. Hinting instead of answering a direct question. I had to mute myself on a Zoom call yesterday with a big prospect who has dropped hints that feature XYZ is a requirement, but has not directly stated so. My account exec, You haven't stated that XYZ is a requirement, but you've said many things that suggest that it is. Our company does not do XYZ, and we have no plans to do so in the future. Do you require XYZ, and is that a deal breaker? Prospect rambles for 20 minutes without saying yes or no, interrupted only by the account executive interjecting 4 or 5 times to repeat the question, then asks, what is our timeline for implementing support for XYZ? Me. On my 3rd whiskey already. Story 39. As I understand it, this is a cultural thing, not like an American versus European thing or what have you, but a family culture thing. Some people are raised to believe that asking directly for what you want is rude, like you're being demanding or entitled to their assistance time. Other people are raised like how you sound. Just spit it out and ask for what you want. Lots of miscommunication, misunderstanding, and judgment comes up when these two cultures clash. Group A sees Group B as rude and pushy. Group B sees Group A as spineless and unable to communicate effectively. Both have merit in their own ways. Sometimes it's difficult or awkward to ask directly for what you want, depending on what it is. And it's way better if you can just imply what it is and everyone understands. Hard to think of an example off the top of my head, but I'm thinking along the lines of something very personal and/or embarrassing. Other times you need to be clear, concise, and direct. There are situations that call for a bit of both. Frankly, I was also raised with Group B and strongly believe in open, honest communication, but even I recognize the occasional need for subtlety. Just different styles of communication, my dude. Story 40. It should be noted that some people, like myself, tend to relate through similar experiences and will share such things after other people mention it. We aren't trying to one-up, but to just relate to you. That being said, real one-uppers are super annoying, and there are cross-sections of one-uppers and people who share through relatable experiences. Answer: I was looking for this comment. I have been accused of being a one-upper on more than a couple of occasions, and I've never understood it. If someone had a story I could relate to, I would interject my own experiences, not to one-up, but to show common ground, a form of social connection. It wasn't until recently that I'd started to read more on the subject. Imagine my surprise when I learned it's a symptom of neurodivergence, and that I have a lot of the characteristics. It was actually a huge relief to me to realize that my brain just works differently than most other people. Story 41. The one time I did that, I was feeling sorry for myself about what a rough month it had. Admittedly, I did have an organ removed, and unwittingly kept doing it to my friend who'd been trying to vent about her rough month. She finally laughed at me and said, "You win." It snapped me out of my pity party in the best way, and I mended my behavior. Story 42. I've got a guy I work with who expects everything you say to be a one-upper. So when you start to speak, he immediately starts talking over you to emphasize that yes, his is the better story anecdote. Story 43. I separate yappers into 2 groups. The ones that have interesting things to say, hobbies, news, mutual interests, movies, music, etc. These ones I like a lot. I don't even care if they're talking for 30 minutes straight. If it's entertaining, it's fine by me. My best friend was a yapper. People complained about him a lot. I didn't care. I would listen to him all day. Then there's the other type of yapper, the one that first has nothing interesting to say most of the time. Second, interrupts people speaking actually interesting things to talk about themselves, or make a completely unnecessary comment. And third, talk so much and never listen. I dislike this type. Story 44. I used to be that way, but the older I get, the more I notice how much it annoys people, and honestly, how much it annoys me. I try to cut it out as much as I can. Being quiet isn't really in my nature, but you do end up learning a lot more that way. Answer: Hey, you seem self-aware. So please teach me how to best handle people like you. I need to know how to respectfully handle super talkers who I think will handle it graciously, and how to firmly handle super talkers who will get a little combative. Obviously, I can't just go around telling everybody to shut up, but it's also not working out for me, just waiting for them to shut up. For example, someone asks a question, I have an answer ready, but they just keep talking after asking the question for like 5 paragraphs. 50-150 chance on whether they will loop back to the question they asked. Story 45. This is me. I know it, and I'm not proud of it. It almost feels like speaking is a compulsion. I have learned to just physically place my hand over my mouth in a way that, hopefully, makes it look like I'm thinking, rather than physically holding myself back from jumping into the conversation. Sometimes it physically hurts to keep myself from talking. I know that it's annoying as hell. So from one of us who is mildly self-aware, I'm sorry that we do that. Story 46. I catch myself doing this. It's usually because I am just nervous about coming up with a good reply to their question. Then, when I should be asking a question back, I just sit there and wonder if I have made a fool myself, which of course I have because I eliminate the flow of the conversation. Story 47. On the other side of this, people who ask you a question, not because they want to hear your answer, but because they are hoping to be asked the same back and segue into whatever they actually wanted to talk about. Story 48. OMFG. I train people at my job and I'm at the point where I straight up tell them, hey, ask questions. I don't care if they're stupid. If you smile and nod your head while not understanding my instructions, then mess up. You will not be working with me long. Answer. Counterpoint. When I start a new job, oftentimes my boss would go on talking for 10 minutes nonstop with a whole truckload of information. I need time to digest all of these. And a lot of times what the boss said doesn't actually make much sense until you start working by yourself and come across some problems to solve. So when my boss asks me if I have any questions during orientation, I usually just answer, I need time to digest all of this. I will let you know when something comes to mind. Story 49. I've struggled with this all of my life. I always operated under the assumption that if someone wanted me to know something, they'd just tell me. Took me way too long to realize this is how you express interest and that it's not actually rude. Story 50. I both fudge do this and I despise that I do it and dislike it when people do it to me. From what I understand, it's a common ADHD struggle. Although sometimes people confuse a conversation with a monologue and need to be interrupted. Story 51. That's how I realize I have ADHD. I need to actively think about not interrupting you. Then I don't listen to what you're saying anymore, so it's still a fail. Fortunately, it's not always like this, but if I am excited, you are not finishing your sentences with me. As soon as I understood what you want to say to me or the idea you want to convey to me, my brain just skipped to the next step. It sucks. Answer. This. Unfortunately, interrupting someone is something I constantly struggle with due to my ADHD, and it's simultaneously become my biggest insecurity over the years. I can help but add to the conversation as soon as I hear something I can relate to. And, unfortunately, I don't realize I'm interrupting until it's too late. I just blurt it out, and in the moment it feels like I'm making a connection with them. But I fear I have ruined a lot of conversations from this. I also fear that it makes me seem vain or selfish when I talk about myself too much, and that utterly sucks. However, I am always actively listening to the other person throughout the whole conversation, and I'll ask a million questions without actively having to prompt myself to do so, which I think is definitely appreciated by whomever I'm speaking with. Story 52. One of my uni housemates always did this. She loved debating and would laugh at you if you ever got worked up during the discussion. She would then play the "aw, you're so sensitive" card, but it was just so infuriating having to deal with her. Story 53. I'm one of those. I always try to see problems from all angles. When someone talks about a problem with me, I tend to try to convey the other perspective too. I know I do this, and I try to be conscious about it because I know it's annoying. But in my mind, there usually is a, yeah, but I can get equally annoyed with people who can't or refuse to look beyond their own point of view. But yeah, I'm an annoying prick at times. Working on it though. Answer. Sounds like you always want to find the good in people, the most honest, good explanation for someone's behavior. Unfortunately, when you play devil's advocate to somebody after only hearing a few sentences about a situation, you fail to understand that the other person may intimately know and have known for a long time that the person you're devil's advocating for is a humongous pile of shit. So now you're triggering the other person by insisting there must be some other reason for the behavior and invalidating all of their feelings surrounding the scenario. You haven't tried to understand the situation at all, but rather tried to flip it around in the victim's face, which is annoying to say the least. Story 54. Or even just never having anything positive to say. Every sentence seems to be, I don't like XYZ. Why can't we look more for things we enjoy and are grateful for? Don't make disliking everything your personality. Story 55. And not taking any steps to change what they're complaining about. I've ended friendships because I just can't handle it, which I see as a flaw in my own patience and empathy, but I still need to protect my sanity. Story 56. It's not just the complaining, it's the victim mindset that often comes along with it. I'm a professor and couldn't tell you how many times I've had to bite my tongue when students complain and make excuses about stuff that most people deal with regularly. Story 57. Props for being able to adjust. I had a similar experience, except it was regarding the way I told stories thinking I was funny by dragging them along and smiling the whole time. I was painfully not funny. I saw a comedian doing an interview where he basically said shorter is better. Switched to short, dry delivery, and noticed I got genuine reactions after that. Story 58. There's bringing up a similar thing to relate and show empathy. Then there's bringing it up to hijack the conversation and making it about oneself. It really never goes away, does it? Every time it's a consideration. Thank you. Story 59. My soon-to-be ex-husband does this, and it's so strange to me. Like you said, lying about things that don't matter. What's even the point of making up such benign things? It's so bizarre. He would tell people that he makes pickles every summer, when in fact he made pickles one summer. Then he changes how many pounds of pickles he made every time he tells the story. Sometimes it's 100 pounds, sometimes it's 300 pounds. He's got this braggy way about him, like everything he says needs to be so impressive. Story 60. Oh God, I worked with someone like this. It was always stupid things too. She would say she was going out to lunch with someone specific, and when we all came back from lunch, she would mention that the leftovers she ate were bad. I thought you went out to lunch with so-and-so? Oh, he canceled. After many, many instances like this, you learn not to believe anything they say. Story 61. Adding to this to say lying as a joke. It's frustrating and, most of the time, objectively unfunny. This past Christmas, I met my boyfriend's extended family. They're from Peru, living in Spain, and they have family members all over the darn place. Venezuela, Italy, Norway, the US, so on. So when I told his cousin I was from the US, and he responded with, "Oh, I was born in New York," I had zero reason to think he was lying. So I asked him which part of New York, and he was like, "Ha ha ha, I'm just kidding. Am I just a wet blanket? Which part of that am I supposed to laugh at?" Story 62. I once had a friend who was asked, "How do you get your teeth so white?" And she told them, "IDK, I don't do anything." Homegirl had multiple teeth whitening stuff that she used. IDK, if this counts as doesn't matter, but she also said that she was Latina because her family was from Mexico. They were Mennonite immigrants from Germany and/or Poland. She had to fake tan to keep up appearances. Always wondered what else she lied about. Story 63. Had a friend like this, except she also would start arguments over the obvious lie and get legitimately upset when you called them out on it. If they lied about something that could take seconds to solve, they'd let it go for months if you caught the lie, to be spiteful. That stopped pretty quickly. Story 64. I have people in my life that do this, and it drives me nuts. They also try to gaslight the fudge out of me if I call them out and say they never said that, or that wasn't what they meant. I try to limit contact with them now, but it's hard because they are family and such. Story 65. Wow, you described my former coworker to a T. She acted like we were BFFs from the first day I met her, constantly talked shoot about everyone else to me, then swore she wouldn't tell anyone my secrets, was obviously very insecure, and had to constantly be the center of male attention. Drama magnet for sure. Story 66. I see myself in this, and it's uncomfortable. ETA. I think for me, this came from getting very little attention or validation in childhood. Our family was also very socially isolated. My parents didn't have friends, and we lived far away from all family. I think because of this, I got both very good at putting on the charm and drawing people in, while never learning the nuances of social dynamics. Also mixed in some ADHD and impulsivity. Anyway, learning. Well, mostly I stay away from people these days. Story 67. My ex-college roommate called me her sister within days of meeting. I remember feeling pure terror, but I chalked it down to my high walls and trust issues when it comes to new people. Decided to give her the benefit of the doubt, chalked it down to joking, and decided to allow myself to not run at the first perceived yellow-orange flag, a real problem in my life as an avoidant runner. Fine. We get a bit close, and that's when she one day decided to discuss her boyfriend's male body part size, shape, and color to me in graphic detail. Never asked, knew the guy, and he was chill. I was icked out, but again, I thought maybe this is how female friendships work as I grew up without it and might just not know. Things graduated to her looping me into every fight they'd have, etc. I assessed the dynamic and realized I wanted not much to do with this lady, but to live cordially and keep the peace. As soon as she noticed I was pulling my energy back, she became directly antagonistic in private and gathered a cabal of people against me, making my school experience so traumatic, I fell into a depression and became a shell, LMAO, so lesson learned there. Story 68. You have to be very careful with these kinds of people and spot them as early as possible. The worst part is that they can destroy your other relationships without being impacted, and they don't see the problem. Story 69. Holy fudge. That's a former friend of mine I cut off abruptly permanently last year. Sad thing is, we were so alike that we got on like a house fire. I thought the little yellow flags popping up were trust issues from a previous friendship that fudged me up, but in hindsight, fudge, oof. Story 70. Yes, I have a guy I regularly work with. We'll just be driving back from a job and we'll be telling a story, and he'll interrupt me in the middle to go on a latch tangent about himself. 10-15 later, he'll have to be like, so I was saying, it's so annoying. It's gotten to the point where he'll be quiet for a whole car ride and just let him go on while I respond with, oh, yeah, and Story 71. One of my family members, no dementia or Alzheimer's, just has nothing else to say, will literally tell the same exact stories the same exact way every time I visit them. A lot of times in the same visit. And it's always complaining and negativity. It's so beyond exhausting. I have to mentally prepare myself before going. And even then, my mental health suffers for a few days after. Story 72. My contractor does this. He has nothing going on. So when something incredibly small happens, he tries to repeat it to me multiple times in the same phone call. After I hang up, he sends me an email repeating the thing he already said to me 5 times over the phone. Sometimes he calls me back right after that email just to say he sent me a follow-up email about what we discussed. Then he repeats it 2 or 3 more times. I think he's mentally ill. I've told him he can't lock me into a 45-minute phone conversation where he only has one thing to say. He doesn't get it. Like he literally can't comprehend that maybe someone on Earth could possibly have more they need to do today besides this one call. Boomers who have nothing going on, so they assume everyone else in their orbit doesn't either, drive me nuts. Story 73. Same stories drive me nuts. Like you don't value our time together where you have to repeat the thing you told me the last 5 times we spoke. My dad does this with movies and TV shows he likes so much. He's probably asked me if I've ever heard of Mad Men like 50 times. Story 74. I told my therapist I was annoyed by hearing other people eat, chewing, and swallowing loudly. To describe it, I said it sounds like they're eating a massive, wet female body part, and she gasped before laughing. But seriously, I just can't do it anymore. When it's children, it's different. They're kids, but to an adult, I say, no one wants to hear you masticate. Story 75. It's so funny how much this is a cultural gap too. In Chinese, Korean, and probably other Asian cultures too, it's an expected polite gesture as a guest to slurp down, devour food being offered. It is construed as not liking the taste if you eat it in a civilized manner. Story 76. I told a former friend that my soon-to-be ex-husband was refusing to do his taxes, halting any progress towards our divorce. Her response was to start talking about how taxes are never easy or fun. I have no idea why people are like this. Story 77. I sometimes pull the nothing card, and I think it comes from self-worth esteem issues. I don't think what I said is important or funny enough to repeat. If you heard it, fine. If you didn't lose anything. Sometimes it's even a relief because I can be awkward and say things I immediately regret. Story 78. As someone with auditory processing issues, these people are awful and rude. I will even repeat back to them what my brain thought they said to prove it was a processing issue and not inattentiveness, and still have them get huffy. At that point, I usually just shrug and say, guess it wasn't important if you don't want to repeat it. Story 79. If I'm walking with a friend and I say something, he won't hear me. He'll say, what? So I'll say it again. But once again, he doesn't hear me. So he says, what? But really, it's just some insignificant shoot that I'm saying. But now I'm yelling, that tree is far away. Mitch Hedberg. Story 80. This is especially annoying when you have a hearing problem yourself. I struggle hearing inside of echoey places or over other noises sometimes that don't seem to bother other people. But when you ask somebody to repeat it, they get annoyed with you. Story 81. If I give a compliment about appearance, I have a rule that'll only compliment something they've clearly chosen. So like something they're wearing, or a tattoo, or their hairstyle. A choice they've made to present themselves to the world, and something that I can validate for them. Physical features are not something they chose. Story 82. I sort of intentionally, but not completely, made a coworker uncomfortable the other day when she commented on my weight loss. I certainly could have stood to lose a few pounds, but it wasn't from eating right and exercise. I replied, yeah, stress and depression really takes a toll on you sometimes. She just ended the conversation there. Story 83. I do this. I discovered they call it circumstantial speech in psychology. It can be a trait or a potential indicator of various conditions like ADHD, CPTSD, schizoid personality type disorder. My psychologist will sometimes point it out to get me back on track. It just feels like I have to explain the context, how I came up with the thought, not just the thought itself, because that's how thoughts work inside my mind. When I do it, I'm verbalizing the internal process I used to think about the question, conversation, etc. Look at me, I'm doing it right now. Story 84. Oh, sweet baby Jesus, yes, my spouse, who I truly love, cannot tell you anything without giving you 20 minutes of backstory, front story, side story, and half a dozen unrelated points, usually when I'm headed out the door, and then gets hurt when I beg them to get the point because I really have to go. Story 85, right? Probably overstepping, but I did respond to a couple of comments saying that it may not be on purpose. Plus, sometimes neurotypicals don't communicate their annoyance and expect us just to know that we're being annoying, and we are, NDs, seen as bad at communication. Ugh. Story 86. Oh yes, I currently have a friend like that. We met on Bumble. And it drives me nuts. But I'll even try and talk about anything random and she'll be like, lol, yay. Or I'll ask how she's doing and she'll be like, I'm good, and doesn't ask me back. Story 87. OMG, people used to do this at the climbing gym I worked at, and I dislike it because 50 of people wanted a shift covered. 40 were trying to climb and 10 wanted a date. Please lead with the ask so that I know how to respond. Story 88. Oh, I dislike this so much. Sorry I make yummy sounds when food is tasty. What the fudge? Why stop same thing with smacking lips and sighing with contentment or moaning with enjoyment while eating? It just grosses me out so much. Enjoy your food, but F's keep it in your pants. Story 89. My mother-in-law went through a phase where she would moan loudly when she was eating, and her husband would comment about how much he loved it. It was so gross and intimacy I wanted to turn off my ears. Story 90. I changed positions in the company and now got 2 coworkers next to me. One sniffles all the darn time while living, then while talking does several sniffs like he trope of someone who did way too much cocaine. The other sounds like he's trying to suck wet oatmeal through a straw up his nose a few times a day. Never hear them blow their nose. That's the guy across the office floor who does trumpet solos 4 times a day. Pushed me into noise-canceling earbuds. Story 91. Trust me, when this happens, it's usually allergy season. I usually have a sinus headache at the same time. Blowing does nothing. It's just constant. It's definitely worse for me than for you. I do carry those pocket-sized tissues, though. Story 92. Everyone that I know who does this has ADHD. It's highly hereditary. I am guilty of this, and so is my partner. Also ADHD. Usually a kind reminder will work. Sometimes you have to remind them more than once. Story 93. When I say that's fair to someone, it means I don't agree with you, but I understand your point and don't want to get into it further because it's not worth the argument. If the people you're talking to are anything like me, this may be why it bothers you. You understand the subtext. Story 94. You'll be staring at something near someone, and I notice in my peripherals that they think I'm staring at them. Then I try not to stare back, but it's hard and you keep catching each other. You try to look elsewhere, but my Cheeto brain gets bored and wanders back. Very awkward. Story 95. And/or when they listen, not just to hear you out, but seemingly with the intent to find a place where they can construe what you said to fit the agenda of what they want to say, whatever their particular little soapbox is, etc. Story 96. I just look people dead in the eye and say, yeah, well, I'm still tired though. And if they press on, I don't say anything because I'm actually tired. But somehow this person has told me twice now how they have less energy. Story 97. This always drives me insane. Like someone can't possibly be tired without having kids. Like why do they have the monopoly on being tired? Even if you don't feel like my reason for not sleeping is as valid as yours, I am still tired nonetheless. It doesn't change that. Also, I didn't make you have kids. That was your choice. Ugh, LOL. Story 98. I just let them win and make a note not to engage in the future. It's no use exhausting myself with whatever contest power struggle they're imagining. If I have to keep in contact with them, like work, I make sure to gray rock them. Energy vampires. Story 99. It's a hierarchical thing. I think you'll probably notice a person like this doesn't do this with their boss because they're subordinate to their boss. If they do it with you, they either consciously or subconsciously define their identity, at least in part by considering themselves superior to you and smarter than you. That or it's an insecure thing where they consider you a threat because you are a challenge to their self-image, and they have to compete with you because they don't like the feeling of you being above them. Story 100. Yes, I have a dude at work, great guy, get along with him. He is smart and we work together well, but man, he is always a contrarian to every idea. Just like what you said, Sometimes it'd bring up something that he himself recommended, and he'd start the well. Like, dude, it was your idea. Story 101. Holy shoot, I had to resort to recording conversations with my ex too. Absolutely everything I said was wrong, and if I ever brought it up again, it never happened, and I was trying to start a fight by suggesting he's lying. Me, the sky is blue. Him, blue. That's the stupidest thing I've ever heard. The sky is clearly not blue. Me, so what color is it? Him, you're obviously trying to start a fight, and I'm not having this conversation. A later date. Me, so you know how you said the other day the sky isn't blue? Him, no, I didn't. Why would I ever say the sky isn't blue when it clearly is? Not only is it blue, we never had that conversation. I'd then be told I was crazy, making stuff up to cause an argument. This was almost 10 years ago, and I'd never heard the term gaslighting, so I had no idea that was what he was doing to me. I honestly thought I was losing my mind and was starting to question my reality. That's when I started recording. Story 102. On the bright side, you're growing into a better version of yourself. I used to interrupt people a lot because I have severe ADHD, and I'd lose what I was going to say easily, so I'd reflexively interrupt people so I wouldn't forget. Story 103. I had someone do that and didn't catch the hint. I went on an easily 20-minute explanation of the best strategies for getting the seat you want. I showed her the apps I used to book and the different times of day airlines validated seats. She stopped talking long before I realized she was bored, and my friend was dying explaining it to me later. Story 104. In college, me and some friends in my dorm ordered pizza and chocolate lava cakes. We all split the cost and got an equal amount of pizza. Another girl on the floor, who was constantly passive-aggressive or hinting at things without saying them directly, came out and said, "Wow, that pizza smells so good." She had done this kind of thing before, and even though it annoyed me, I figured I could spare a slice. So I gave her one. But then the chocolate lava cakes came out. I was obsessed with Domino's chocolate lava cakes at the time, and they came in packs of 2. While I'm eating the first one, this girl says, "Wow, that chocolate lava cake looks so good." I said nothing. She continued to comment on it, so finally I offered her a bite and she took it. At this point, I was so fudge annoyed. Then she said, "Wow, that was so good. I wish I could have a whole one." I don't remember the last time I felt rage like that. I managed not to blow up at her. All I said was no. But she was so shocked that I would dare say no that she literally cried and went back to her room. That day, I told myself that I would never again entertain passive aggression. You want something from me? Ask. Answer. I don't remember the last time I felt rage like that. I am screaming. I get this. I had a roommate at the dorm. We got on well and shared food if needed. She was penniless, so I shopped for us many times. In our last year, I gained a lot of weight due to PCOS and IR. She was leaner and sportier, and after a while she started to make seemingly harmless comments about my weight. I have tried running and dieting, but there was a lot of stress, and I started to resent her due to her being a constant watchdog. Next, grocery shopping came around, and she was very particular about not wanting bread or chocolate at all. She wanted to stay lean, so I just bought a 14 bread and 2 chocolates for the afternoon and the next day for myself. Long story short, she ate almost the full bread and both candy bars that afternoon. I still remember clearly I could hit her in the face. I was so freaking mad. Looking back, it was the beginning of the end of our friendship. It was 25 years ago, but it still pisses me off. Story 105. Oh my God, I have had the same thing happen, and it made me so angry. I finally said to the person, I have intense claustrophobia, and if I can't see out, I could have a panic attack on the plane, and nobody wants that. I booked this seat for that reason. I also don't like to talk to strangers, sorry. All of which is true. Story 106. In Dutch, we say, nie is ook een antwoord, whenever we notice someone is beating around the bush instead of just saying no. It translates to no is a legitimate answer as well. Works great to cut a stream of apologies short and just have them say no so we can both move on with our day. Story 107. Yep, I just ended a relationship partially due to this. He was always so subtle, and at some point it just felt like he was lying to me. At the same time, he felt like I was too direct and harsh when I directly told him about concerns or problems. It just became impossible to find a middle ground. Story 108. Hello, male version of me. I called a salon and asked how much it'd be to get my nails done. They said they were booked all morning and afternoon, sadly. No, motherfucker, I did not ask about appointment times. I asked about the price. Anyway, yeah, medically diagnosed? What up? Story 109. This comment lit up so many light bulbs in my brain, I think I started a fire. OMG. The answering questions they think I'm asking, combined with OPs, finishing my sentences because they think they know what I'm going to say, creates so much interpersonal anxiety urge for me, and miscommunication would be so easily solved if we all just communicated directly and stopped assuming the intentions of others. I'm also ADHD and suspected autism, so yeah, I feel you. Story 110. I'm ADHD, so I can hard relate. I prefer directness versus beating around the bush, or worse, hinting instead of just directly stating. I'm quite sure my mom is ADHD as well, though she'd never even consider that herself. But due to her heavy masking for all these years, she's leaned in hard to the hint versus ask thing. It's incredibly annoying to deal with and causes a lot of communication issues between us. But then, even more annoying is that my dad has learned to expect that type of communication. So when I ask him a question, he is always trying to infer the true meaning of my questions and hardly ever answers my questions at face value because he thinks I'm communicating like my mother does. I live with them, which just makes it way more fun, lol. Not Story 111. Issurinum. Just some unsolicited advice for fellow neurospicy people who relate through similar experiences. You can completely negate any negative impact this might have by remembering to ask your interlocutor a question about their experience right after you're done, or even by saying, sorry, your story just reminded me of that. Please go on, or similar. Answer. Also, while it is good to relate, recognize that to other people you could still be coming off as the one-upper. I was with the prior poster's comment until he seemed to imply he could dismiss the criticism because it wasn't his intent, but to other people it can still have the same impact. I also use stories to relate, and at some point realized while that was effective in the right spots, it could come off as one-upping and poor social etiquette. So I started checking myself and asking myself, 1, do I need to tell a story, or will it ruin the impact of the other person's story or flow? And 2, if my story is additive and not something potentially better or one-upping, then tell it. As an added bonus, if it's borderline, you can also sort of throw your story under the bus a bit, but acknowledging their experience is more impressive, but then relating what you have done and potentially choosing to leave out a detail that you think might overshadow them. For example, they just told a story of going to Japan and staying in an impressive hotel with cool amenities. You can relate by sharing your story of going to Japan, but if you stayed in a nicer hotel, just leave that part out and acknowledge how cool theirs sounded. You can still relate and start a discussion about your trips to Japan without people perceiving that you are telling the story because you want to let everyone know you stayed in a better hotel. Story 112. I was looking for this comment. I have been accused of being a one-upper on more than a couple of occasions, and I've never understood it. If someone had a story I could relate to, I would interject my own experiences, not to one-up, but to show common ground, a form of social connection. It wasn't until recently that I'd started to read more on the subject. Imagine my surprise when I learned it's a symptom of neurodivergence and that I have a lot of the characteristics. It was actually a huge relief to me to realize that my brain just works differently than most other people. Answer. There's definitely a difference between one-uppers and people adding their own experience, and they can provide very similar accounts, but the upper has to make the story about them sound great. For example, I have a young son, and I told 2 people that we think he's going to crawl soon. Friend 1 adds her experience most of the time, and friend 2 is a one-upper. Friend 1 said, I think I crawled when I was 9 months old. One-upper said, I never crawled. I went straight to walking. It just comes across as more them focused rather than adding to the story. The one-upper is notorious for it. Everything has to be related to something she excelled at or made her stand out, so we take much of what she said with an expectation of one-upping. The person who always adds their experience adds stories that are more relatable or allows me to follow up on their comment, again, at a more equal level. Story 113. Group 2 is my neighbor. She has no internal monologue. She just blurts out whatever's going through her head. I can generally manage people like this, but it is coupled with her trying to have a conversation, but only so far as she has to wait for her turn to talk and doesn't even listen to what I have to say. Nice lady in small doses. Story 114. Find autistic people. That's who will fit into group 1 if you let them tell you about a special interest of theirs. Being able to talk about an interest for extended periods of time without requiring any actual back and forth is a hallmark sign of autism. Story 115. I work with someone who is the second yapper. She doesn't read the room, unfortunately. Me and somebody else will be having a private conversation in the conference room, and she'll come and directly ask, "Hey, what are you two talking about? Is it something I can know? Are you gossiping?" There's been many times where we are celebrating someone's achievements, and she'll come and make it about her. Just attention-seeking behavior. Story 116. Hey, you seem self-aware, so please teach me how to best handle people like you. I need to know how to respectfully handle super talkers who I think will handle it graciously, and how to firmly handle super talkers who will get a little combative. Obviously, I can't just go around telling everybody to shut up, but it's also not working out for me, just waiting for them to shut up. For example, someone asks a question, I have an answer ready, but they just keep talking after asking the question for like 5 paragraphs. 50-50 chance on whether they will loop back to the question they asked. Story 117. Something that helps me in this situation is to answer the question, then ask it in return. I've found that people will ask a, "Did you do anything fun over the weekend?" type of question because they want to tell you about their weekend. I would guess that they have had too many coworkers like one of the other commenters who says they don't give a shoot about the other person's weekend, so won't ask the question in return. So I make sure to ask it back so they know I'm not a self-centered jerk. Story 118. Sometimes it feels like people talking at each other than talking to each other. Like they are reading Facebook posts about themselves to each other in real-life conversations instead of actually having an actual two-way conversation. Story 119. Same. Exactly the same. And it sucks because I'm so interested but always wondering if my questions will be taken as creepy or invasive or too personal, even if it's just like, "And how old are yours?" After they've just asked me the same question, I probably seem so off-putting because I hesitate too long or just don't ask a question back. Story 120. I do the exact same thing. I can be asked, "How's your day going?" And I'll just bluntly say good or not bad, "Thanks for asking," and mindlessly go about my day. Sometimes I catch on, and a minute later will perk up with the same question they asked me. I don't mean to be rude, but it's like my brain just doesn't function socially. Story 121. Counterpoint. When I start a new job, oftentimes my boss would go on talking for 10 minutes nonstop with a whole truckload of information. I need time to digest all of these. And a lot of times what the boss said doesn't actually make much sense until you start working by yourself and come across some problems to solve. So, when my boss asks me if I have any questions during orientation, I usually just answer, "I need time to digest all of this. I will let you know when something comes to mind." Story 122. Same. I'm trying to be better about it, but it just feels so unnatural to me. Like it kind of feels nosy. I'm not really sure, Lol. I guess my baby step is, I'm trying to end my answers with like, "How about you?" But that kind of feels like cheating. Making friends is hard. Story 123. My whole family has ADHD, and our family gatherings are just a bunch of people casually talking over each other. It's annoying, but somehow endearing as no one gets mad. They just carry on or trail off, or catch wind of something more interesting than they were yapping about and hitch onto that wagon as it passes. Story 124. God, me too. And I can hear myself. And then I comment on how self-absorbed and ridiculous I sound, and I just end up sounding like a nut. I make a terrible first impression, but once you get past that verbal diarrhea, I'm quite nice, thoughtful, and try so much to not talk so much. Story 125. This thing, yes, sir. Unfortunately, interrupting someone is something I constantly struggle with due to my ADHD, and it's simultaneously become my biggest insecurity over the years. I can't help but add to the conversation as soon as I hear something I can relate to, and unfortunately, I don't realize I'm interrupting until it's too late. I just blurt it out, and in the moment it feels like I'm making a connection with them, but I fear I've ruined a lot of conversations from this. I also fear that it makes me seem vain or selfish when I talk about myself too much, and that utterly sucks. However, I am always actively listening to the other person throughout the whole conversation, and I'll ask a million questions without actively having to prompt myself to do so, which I think is definitely appreciated by whomever I'm speaking with. Story 126. This is maybe the thing I dislike about myself the most. I have ADHD and ASD. I interrupt when I should be listening, and I repeat over explain myself when I feel misunderstood or like my question wasn't answered fully. Sometimes it sounds like I'm arguing even when there isn't a disagreement. I try to notice it, stop, sometimes acknowledge it, and apologize. I practice conversations when I'm alone. It's hard, but I am learning to accept that it's just my nature. I can mask it only so many hours of the day. I need space to be unfiltered, or I have a sensory meltdown. I think the hardest part is that I present as neurotypical. I feel like even my partner forgets. I wish I could wear a sign explaining and asking people to be patient with me. I grew up feeling like I am just someone who makes people upset, constantly apologizing and trying not to make anyone mad, because I was in trouble a lot for things I didn't know I was doing and/or couldn't help doing. Misunderstanding instructions because I took them too literally or was afraid to ask them to repeat it multiple times. Being accused of ignoring someone because I was hyper-focused or having auditory processing issues and truly couldn't hear them. Repeating myself with slightly different wording because I'm thinking out loud and afraid I'm being misunderstood. Anyways, it does get better. I accept myself as best as I can.